This is an ABC podcast.
Two Australian doctors are at the forefront of an international effort to consign a horrific childbirth injury to the past. The doctors head the International Federation of Gynecologists and Obstetricians Fistula Programme, which has set a deadline of 2030 for its elimination. As Kerry Worthington reports, it's a massive task with an estimated 1.2 million women worldwide needing treatment for obstetric fistulas.
Professor A.J. Rane and Dr. Andrew Browning have spent a great deal of their working lives trying to eliminate obstetric fistulas. That's where a hole may develop between the vagina and bladder or rectum after a difficult prolonged labour. A.J. Rane is a professor of urogynecology at James Cook University in Townsville, who's also established a charity hospital in India for women with genital injuries. He says fistulas are a human rights issue.
It's a neglected public health issue, and it puts these women into a terrible situation where they're leaking either bowel fluid or bladder fluid or both through their genital tracts 24/7. They're smelling 24/7. The babies are usually dead. They're kicked out of their villages. They're socially ostracized. Their marriages break down. Nobody will even feed them. They're usually malnourished.
The World Health Organization says each year tens of thousands of women worldwide develop obstetric fistula, overwhelmingly in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia, and in geographically remote, economically poor areas. Obstetrician Andrew Browning, who's the medical director of Australian charity the Barbara May Foundation, says the only reason obstetric fistulas aren't seen in Australia or other developed countries is because births are generally monitored by highly trained medical staff, and caesareans are an option if a woman is in labour for too long.
Indeed, the world's first fistula hospital was built in New York in 1855 because fistulas were common in America and Europe back then. 1 in 15, 1 in 20 women used to die in labour back then. They used to have a lot of fistulas as well. But that hospital is now closed in New York because with the advent of safe obstetrics for all women, safe obstetric care in hospitals, women no longer get fistulas in the developed world, if we can call it that. I mean, there are some rare isolated examples of fistulas, but more due to operations gone wrong or infections or other diseases, but not due to these long, 5-7 day labour. You'll never see that.
The International Federation of Gynecologists and Obstetricians, known as FIGO, is the global governing body for specialists in the field. One of its main projects is fistula surgery training, overseen by the Committee for Fistula and Genital Trauma, led by the Australians Professor Rane and Dr. Browning. A.J. Rane explains that fistula surgeons need specific training that requires a gynecological or urological surgical background, but that the best results come from training up local doctors.
When I was training in Britain, some British doctors would go to Africa and talk about how they held a fistula camp for 2 weeks and operated on 149 women and how exciting it was to be there. And then what? You left them. You never went back for another year. And so when FIGO invited me to chair this fistula committee, we decided that we would turn it around, and we have now managed to train 58 full-time surgeons in Africa and Bangladesh. And between them, in the last 4 years, they have done 7,800 cases with a 90% success rate. We have 5 training centers now, 2 in Kenya, 2 in Tanzania, and 1 in Addis Ababa, where all these new surgeons are being trained. So we're trying to train local surgeons, which is much more acceptable to the women as well because they speak the language.
The focus on training new doctors raises the question of why address the consequences of unsafe childbirth rather than try to prevent it in the first place. Professor Rane says the FIGO training initiative is one part of a 3-pronged strategy to reduce what he calls the 3 delays in diagnosis, mobilisation and medical intervention.
Really, if we want to prevent fistulas, it is all about safe obstetric care and really very simple dictums like a woman giving birth for the first time should never see a sunrise and a sunset in labor. Anything more than 12 hours needs to be moved. These are simple messages. And what really happens is it reduces the delay of diagnosis and the delay of transport. And then the third delay of treatment hopefully doesn't occur when they get to the hospital that they should. I completely agree with you. NGOs have been remiss, but I think FIGO has realized it's an organization that has the ability to also focus a lot on child spacing, on contraception, and also safe obstetric care. And therefore, really, my aim is that by 2030, the FIGO Fistula Committee should cease to exist. We should have systems in place where we have prevented a lot of fistulas, and no woman should wait more than 6 weeks to have her fistula fixed because we've trained so many surgeons to look after them. That would be the real victory of this program.
The FIGO-trained surgeons are also working through a backlog of more than 1 million women with untreated fistulas. But Dr. Andrew Browning says merely training local doctors to do the procedure properly is not enough.
The frustrating thing is that fistula work is charity work. These patients are too poor to pay, so often the surgeons will be very enthusiastic for a while. They'll do fistula surgery for some years and their skills will build up, but then they'll have responsibilities of family and so forth, and they'll leave and do something else.
On the other hand, Dr. Browning says the aim of eliminating fistula is achievable.
We've done it in the West. So, well, why can't we do it in the rest of the world? And it doesn't cost a great deal. With the Barbara May Foundation, we build hospitals, and we can actually build a reasonable maternity unit for about $500,000. And to run it with our doctors, our midwives, it only costs 160 Australian dollars to ensure a safe delivery for a woman. That's 4 clinic visits, a delivery including a cesarean, and a post-delivery visit checkup as well. So it doesn't take a lot of money to prevent fistulas, but it's just the willpower. Unfortunately, it's extremely difficult to raise money for fistula prevention, maternal health care. I mean, fistula treatment, it is a very emotive subject, and to raise money for fistula treatment is quite easy. People say, oh, I'd love to help a fistula lady, which is lovely and it needs to be done, but to prevent it, it's not quite so compelling for donors. So yeah, we really do struggle to raise the money, and it's been estimated that across Africa we need to build 2,000 new obstetric units and run them to prevent fistulas from happening.
Kerry Worthington was the reporter. You've been listening to The Health Report. I'm Norman Swan. See you next week.